And away we go. So, that's the same old, same old. Look at what me and the lads shared in the group chat, what our reactions are, and a third thing that will eventually come to my head. Anyway, let's see what goes on in our pipelines or whatnot. So I shared a screenshot from an Instagram story, the account named Polymarket, the well-known predictions betting market. The headline or caption of that post that was shared on the Polymarket's Instagram story reads, "World uncertainty reaches all-time high." Now, first, I didn't know what world uncertainty means. There was information on that same Instagram post shared via Instagram stories, and it shows not the likelihood of events happening, but the number of times certain events happened given how very unlikely the chances of those events even happening to begin with. That's at least my understanding. And looking at the level of world uncertainty, it makes sense. The last few weeks, last few months, well, actually, this month and last month, it's the start of 2026, it makes sense that world uncertainty has reached all-time high. I'm hearing so much about what goes on in the world today, most of which are not for the right reasons, nor should they ever happen in the first place. Yet here we are. This is what we have reached. And this surpasses the world wars, the 2008 housing market crash, coronavirus, the lockdowns. Yeah. As it stands now, all of those events in the world has been surpassed by the current rating of world uncertainty as of right now. Absolute mentalness, madness. I'm not sure if we'll ever reach it. No, actually, not even if those levels were to be reached again, it would certainly not be within our lifetimes. Most of us would be dead by the time that happens next time. So yeah, that's something madness. Very, very madness, I'd say. All right, Eric has sent something in the group chat, like he usually does, from Twitter X. The username concerned citizen at B. The caption of that Twitter X post reads, "New documents from the Epstein files now has people speculating as to whether Jeffrey Epstein's DNA was contained within the experimental mRNA gene therapy COVID jabs. Sounds real crazy, but is it?" And then what Eric said directly in response to that post, he said, "We could possibly walking around with Epstein's DNA inside our veins." And then Eric followed that up with, "Wait, so I could have Epstein's DNA inside of me?" And then Risk 11 responded saying, "Gads, uh, gads." I'm not gonna get into. I'm not gonna get myself too deep in that, but yeah, that was what Risk 11 said. So I'm not saying this is true. What if it was? What difference would that make for all of us that had taken the vaccines? Yeah, it just never ends. What are these people on? It is what it is. It was what it was. So on and so forth. All right. Then Risk 11 also said something after he said Gads, saying further Epstein financials show evidence that Andrew sent information about the collapse of a Icelandic bank in 2008. So, wow, that just comes to show. I have a feeling there will be people now saying, is the 2008 market crash orchestrated for the sake of getting things for cheap and just screw every middleman Joe that exists in our world? I hope not. Then again, I wouldn't be surprised if that was even remotely true. The world is a stage, folks. Not my words, but someone said it. And they're not the only ones either. There's going to be a lot more people saying this phrase every now and then, especially as of now, it's going to become more and more apparent. Oh yes. Eric sent in another Twitter X post by the account named Modern History X at Modern History. The caption of that Twitter X post reads, "The Matrix creator, then and now." And the picture of that post shows the creators of the Matrix franchise in 1999 at the top. Of course, they are seen as looking like men, and then the same creators in 2025 shows them as women. I'm not joking. The creators of the Matrix, who were men at the time, are now women. Risk 11 then responded, "They became the system." Now make of that as you will. Make of that as you will. So, yeah, so for those who don't know already, the creators of the Matrix franchise, the movies of the same name, they are trans. They are trans women. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's just what happened. The same people that like the Matrix movies, I'm not sure if they'll be losing their minds or would be laughing their asses off about what the Matrix movies were about, only for the creators of those movies to then be victims, quote unquote victims, of that same system which they criticized as the messages within the Matrix movies. That's at least what I've heard from most people. Not everyone, but there's certainly a handful of people that will certainly say that there is some messaging behind the Matrix movies. That is it. There's nothing else. And again, I don't have too strong of an opinion about people who are trans, gay men, lesbian women, queers, anything relating to the LGBT community. They can go on with their lives the way they want to go on with their lives. And yeah, that's it. In my opinion, I'm cool with the LGBT community, and if they can continue contributing to society as much as anyone else, then what is there to complain about? So anyway, that's all I have to say on the Matrix creators. Next, I've sent a YouTube video into the chat, and the caption, the title of that YouTube video reads, "Why Europe is Creating an Alternative to Visa and MasterCard." And a brief summary of that YouTube video by TLDR News EU. It explains how the EU, the European Union, is wanting to create, I wouldn't say centralized, it's also a integrated payment system equivalent to Visa and MasterCard. And although I have watched the video, I can't remember every exact detail. In the next coming years, the EU is wanting to implement a integrated payment network amongst EU nations. And I'm not sure if I would call these companies, well, if they're not companies, then what are they? These companies relating, or essentially part of the finance sector, are going to be those companies that's going to be part of the integration of a payment network amongst EU state members. And by having that payment network in place, it gives the EU something to work with in the event they are wanting to cut ties with Visa and or MasterCard, or at least any non-EU company or organization. In other words, I would put it, what the EU is trying to do is trying to create a network, not just any network, but something that is a pathway to ensure that the European Union is no longer needed to be dependent on bigger nations like the United States, Russia, China, and the other big players in the economic trade sectors. Risk 11 responded saying, "This is an interesting thing. If they create a system outside of US control, the USA can't use it to blackmail Europe. But there are other reasons for this as well." And that is it. That's all he said. He didn't specify what other reasons the EU might have for creating this payment network that is going to benefit or be used to the benefit of EU state members. It does make a good point, though. As much it will benefit EU countries like Spain, France, Germany, Italy, Austria, Poland, Sweden, and Ireland, and much more EU member states, people will say there are other reasons for this payment network to be put in place. And even I do have ideas for what those reasons are, which I'm not going to say. Not for legal reasons, but I think I've said too much on that. And even months or years after this episode is published, I think a lot of people will know what those reasons are by now, so there's no point me getting to them. Not in the case if I'm wrong. It is something that everyone would collectively say, yeah, now it makes sense. And again, even I do say it, people like, yeah, of course, I knew you would say that, but why now are people catching up on this? Just food for thought. Or at least something that just came to my mind. I want to see how this payment network goes for the EU. There will be benefits for sure. And, well, if this means that the EU is no longer dependent on bigger nations for trade or any financial or export support, so be it. I think I think a lot of countries had relied too much on the US for far too long, and seeing the tariffs now being put in place, then again, it's been so long if they even talked about that. I'm not even sure if they're in place now. If they are, that is a good wake-up call for every other country around the world. Don't rely on the US, even if trade ties with them are very beneficial for that country. That won't last for long. Other countries have got to find other alternatives that they can work with, so that way, something what the US had done now, in recent times with the tariffs, they're not left in the dust. They are well prepared for the worst case scenarios. Next, another Twitter X post shared by Eric in the group chat. The post is by Twitter X user Isaac's Army at Return of Cappy, spelled with a K at the start. The description of the caption of that Twitter X post reads, "Celebrities like Mr. Beast are being used to normalize getting brain chipped. Transhumanism is their end goal. They think they are God. And they're not. They are not God. Never have been, never will be. And I'm serious on that. Nothing is greater than God." But a question that has to be asked, which God are you talking about? I'm not saying I have an answer to it, it's just something for people to think about. Because I know people have different faiths and beliefs, and of course, I know for sure not everyone's going to agree on which God they're talking about, or what God people adhere to. It's important to make specifications and clarify on such statements where situations, sentences, or quotes are massively open to any kind of interpretation. Risk 11 responded to that post that Eric shared with, "Yup." And then he also responded with, "Is Darwinism inevitable? At some point, stage like it's the debate of our time. Do we as a collective society want to fund children with complicated birth defects and lifelong health problems that will only cost taxpayers and state money? Or do we as a society push some type of eugenics where children have a basic standard of intelligence and have a similar level of cognitive abilities? Do the powers be at a certain level want to push the people into being the smartest people, but not smart enough to that they live in an open-air prison, not based on race or ethnicity, solely based on reading and cognitive abilities? At birth, where if child deemed to have abnormal health conditions, do we dispose of them? Do they dispose of them to push a superior race, not based on race, but where cognitive ability, Now, I'm not sure about that. Just reading what Risk 11 said, kind of sounds like that movie where there was this PSA for young children saying that wouldn't life be great where only the smartest people can live? That sounds dystopian, and I don't wish a future like that for anyone. But I know there is a movie like that where the premise is, or the premise of a society in that movie is where children and teenagers, students or pupils, every year or so, they all take a test, and whoever scores the highest will continue to live in society, whilst those students or pupils who scored not so high, they will be inevitably unalived. That's awful. And whilst there will be people that will say, well, what's the point having such people like that exist if they're not going to contribute or adhere to anything? There are people I've warned. There are people out there that ask for a reduction in the human population. Not just the limiting of reproduction of couples, also the reduction of existing people that are alive, regardless of any age. And again, I do not wish anything like that on anyone. It is not okay. And even if there are people that aren't the brightest, I would say at least give them a chance to make up something for themselves, or at least give them a purpose where they can somewhat contribute to society, even if there are physical and or psychological limitations amongst those people, which should give people of all abilities a chance to succeed and achieve whatever dreams they might have. And who knows, maybe there could be a well-known celebrity that could be an inspiration to someone. Some people will call it naive. I'd say it's at least something positive as opposed to whatever stories are going on in this world. Alright, next, I sent a YouTube short, and the title of that YouTube short reads Identifying Garbage History Books. Sarah Payne. And this is a short, so I could just play the audio for you. Hold on.
Which are the good history books and which aren't?
The 30-second test. If the book's about another part of the world, flip to the bibliography, which you can do on Amazon. See, is there anything in the language of the country in question in the bibliography? Like how much? And if there is, yes, I would toss it. How many of you would be interested in reading a book that says it knows everything about the United States and there's not a single English source cited? I think you'd regard the book as garbage. Americans do this routinely, and it's a problem with political science degrees. To pass a language test, and don't try Spanish if you think you're going to talk about the Middle East. If it's going to be Middle East, it better be something like Arabic, Farsi, Turkic, Hebrew, and better yet, if you're really going to be a serious Middle Eastern expert, try all four.
I absolutely agree with that. So yeah, that's a very good information to take. If you're going to learn about anything, at least look at sources or information in the native language of the country or the person's native tongue in question. If anything else, forget it. You could still have a listen, but take it with a pinch of salt. Better late than never. Yeah, that is all I have to say on that. If you're going to talk about or look up on stories on anything, and it's not in the native language of the country that you're looking at, whether it be Arabic for anything in Egypt, Spanish for anything in Spain or most Latin American countries, if it's not in Portuguese for Portugal, Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, etc., or if you're looking at something that is not in French regarding something in France, or countries like Senegal, maybe Cameroon. I can't think of any other French-speaking African nation from the top of my head. If you're looking, yeah, if whatever you're looking at is not in the language that matches the country or the person's native tongue regarding that subject, then don't think about taking that advice or information to heart. Take it with a pinch of salt. And I'd say the same with social media posts. If you want to look at what's going on in Iran, look at posts in Farsi, because that's the language people in Iran speak. If you want to look at what goes on in Venezuela, look at posts in Spanish, because that's the language people in Venezuela speak. At least that's the official language in Venezuela. If you're going to look at what goes on in France, look at posts in French, because that's the language the majority of French people speak, whether it be in their day-to-day life, or the language as spoken in their local and or national government. And again, UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, etc., only look at those in English, because in English, that's the language that everyone in those countries speak natively, and it's also the language of both their local and national governments. So that is very important. That's very important to note. Alright, so next I shared a website in the group chat with the lads. This website called rentahuman.ai. I replied directly saying there's a website where AI can rent you to do tasks for them. I didn't get any response from that. I then responded to what I directly said about the website, saying, thought I'd try it out of curiosity. I made a profile on rentahuman.ai to see if any other AI agents want me to do any tasks for them. And you know what, that'll be interesting. If people are going to be so worried that AI is going to take over our jobs, at least know there are limitations to AI, especially in terms of physical interaction. And since there is a website where AI can rent you to do tasks for them, it just comes to show that there are things that we can do as humans, but that AI cannot do. That's not to say you shouldn't be worried, but AI is at least gives closure to those people who are very skeptical of AI. There's going to be aspects in our world that AI can't do that we as humans can. And AI are willing to pay us money to do those assignments and jobs or tasks for them. It's not going to solve all the problems about AI, but at least gives closure to those AI skeptic people, which I agree with them 70% of the time. And that is everything on the group chat. So now, without being said, let's get into what else is going on in the news. Extremists jailed for plotting deadliest terror attack on UK Jewish community. Just why? Why do people do this? Two men plotting to attack the Jewish community in Manchester have been sentenced to life in prison for their plans. Sedoy intended to smuggle 4 AK-47 rifles, 2 handguns, and 900 rounds of ammunition into the UK for the attack. Rob Potts from Greater Manchester Police stated that the attack could have been the deadliest terrorist attack in UK history. The authorities intervened after the men revealed their plans to an undercover operative. Firstly, thank goodness that someone stopped a potential terror attack in the UK. Not just anywhere, the UK. Anywhere else, I'd be glad with that as well. At least for the UK, it's great that a terrorist attack has been prevented. And I am not going to say that this won't be a serious attack, nor lives would not be lost. To say this is going to be the deadliest terrorist attack in the UK, in UK history, because there have been 2 rifles, 4 AK-47 rifles, 2 handguns, and 900 rounds of ammunition. Whilst as deadly those weapons are, how can you say this could have been the deadliest attack just based on the weapons and the ammunition that have been possessed or been confiscated by by the local authorities. And again, with the weapons, that could have been serious. I do not want to see any more lives being lost, regardless of what people identify as, what their faith is, and even their ancestry. Like with Bondi Beach, Australia, it was devastating. Something like that shouldn't happen again. But that's just me. I'm glad local authorities actually done something, and they have stopped a potential terrorist attack. Thank goodness. The fact that this has been prevented is a win. I'm sick and tired, and I'm outraged by the attacks that have happened in the last few years. Maddening. So glad that the authorities actually did something. Can't believe it took so long for someone to get their act together and do whatever job they have to they had to do to stop something like this. Where was that at Bondi Beach? Where was this when the high schools and schools in America have been shot? Or even in Canada quite recently. Where were those measures? Where were the authorities to stop those people from pulling something off like that? Either way, I'm glad that local authorities in Manchester did something and they put a stop to what could have been a deadly terrorist attack. Thank goodness. Swiss to vote in referendum on right-wing party's proposal to limit population to 10 million. Switzerland will hold a referendum in June on whether to cap its population at 10 million until 2050 by limiting immigration. The Swiss People's Party, a right-wing party, promoted the petition to trigger the referendum. Opponents argue it would harm the Swiss economy and relationships with the European Union, while supporters cite overpopulation concerns. I will say, I love Switzerland. I'm not trying to glaze them on anything and everything. I just like how the Swiss do their things. Their farming, the community, and even the finances. They're very wealthy. I'll give them that. Capping their population, I will say, in general, is a genuine concern. I will give them that. Capping their population to combat immigration. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. And even if this is a way to deter foreigners from coming to Switzerland, what about Swiss nationals? What if people who were born and raised in Switzerland, living in another country, they want to come back, and then all of a sudden, Swiss authorities have said, "Oh no, you can't come back. We have reached our limited capacity." I'm just saying, will this cap apply to foreigners, or will this apply to everyone, both foreigners and Swiss nationals? Because if this applies to Swiss nationals as well, what's going to happen to Swiss citizens who want to come back to Switzerland, yet national and local authorities have said that no, you can't come back. We've reached our capacity. You cannot enter, and not just for any reason. What if it's an emergency, like an urgent emergency? Surely they'll make an exception for those cases. Any other reason? What if the authorities are like, no, you can't come in? We're full. Despite the fact they have so much space to work with. I'm not talking about the Swiss Alps. I know that there aren't much space in those valleys. In the flatlands of Switzerland, surely there's plenty of space to build something. And I'm not sure if I said this a couple of episodes ago. If there's not enough space for anything else on top of the surface of the land, why not they build something beneath the surface? It's just an idea. In my opinion, it would certainly solve the problems regarding limited housing, potential for new local businesses, and by prioritizing new businesses and new homes to be built beneath the surface allows loads of space above the surface for farming. That's at least what I would have done. I would prioritize subterranean, sub-level mixed-use buildings, and then leave whatever land above the surface that is left for agricultural purposes. anyone wants to implement such an idea, I'd love to see it happen. Even if it may cost a couple million more pounds, dollars, francs, euros, whatever currency. I genuinely want to see something like that happen. There's an additional underground city, underground communities, as opposed to what's on top of the surface. Land is very, very scarce, and people would have to use whatever land they have to work with very wisely. So I'll say again, anyone working in municipal, regional governments, they want to implement an idea of building underground cities. I want to see that happen. I want to see how it goes. There could be benefits. Well, except for lack of sunlight, there has to be something to compensate it for sunlight to come in. But if someone has a solution for that, then go ahead. Go right ahead with it. Susan Ley has been ousted as leader of Australia's Liberal Party just after 9 months in the job, losing a leadership ballot to her former Shadow Defence Minister, Angus Taylor, by 34 votes to 17. Taylor, from the party's Conservative faction, said his election as Liberal leader was an immense honour, and that he looked forward to working with new Deputy Leader Jane Hume. Ley said she would resign as an MP and step away completely and comprehensively from public life, harbouring no hard feelings towards the new leader while hoping he gets clear air, something that is not always afforded to leaders. 9 months as leader of Australia's Liberal Party. It's been a while It's been a while since I've heard of the Liberal Party in Australia. Goodness me, it's quite down in the dumps, I'll say that for sure. It is not looking good. It's certainly not looking good for the Liberal Party in Australia. And I have heard a while ago of the One Nation Party, which is a solid right-wing party, who are rising quite swiftly, but gradually, in the Australia-wide polls. I'm not sure if it's for local government or at the national level. The One Nation Party is growing in popularity at some point, and they will continue to grow in that popularity as the years and even the months go by. I'll say that. The Liberal Party will still be around. They'll just never reach the same heights that it once reached all those years ago. If the Liberal Party want to get back in the national level government again, they got to think of something. They got to think of the ideas that attracts not just their current voter base, but ideas that also appeals to a majority of Australians, even if they have beliefs and ideas that otherwise the Liberal Party would never agree with. That's what they have to do. It's going to be a bumpy ride, and I'm not sure if they ever reach those heights again. If they are serious, they will try whatever they can to ensure they reach those heights like they once did all those years ago. Mexican ships carrying humanitarian aid enter Havana harbor. 2 Mexican Navy ships, including the Papaloapan, arrived Thursday in Havana Bay and passed beside El Morro Castle, according to Reuters. After U.S. tariff threats by U.S. President Donald Trump 2 weeks earlier, Cuba began rationing energy and fuel, prompting urgent relief needs amid stricter rationing measures. The Mexican government said one ship carried some 536 tons of mixed food and hygiene items, and the second carried just over 277 tons of powdered milk, totaling over 800 tons, according to the Associated Press. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said her government will send more aid soon, while Havana residents praised the delivery as an unforgettable gesture and said Mexico hasn't abandoned us, noting shortages in hospitals and schools. Petróleos Mexicanos Pemex suspended crude shipments in January. Mexico plans to send 1,500 tons of beans and powdered milk soon, and the US announced $6 million in humanitarian aid this month. So, from what I just read, the tariffs that Trump has been talking about for not all that often, but quite a long time ago, now they're officially being put in place. And countries like Cuba are now being hit because of those tariffs, and they're trying to look for, well, whatever rations that they have in storage. And now countries like Mexico is coming in to save the day. The gesture is great on Mexico's part, I will say, and this is not going to happen. What would happen if Mexico decided not to give aid to Cuba, or even the United States? Again, not that they won't do it. I'm saying this is a hypothetical. What would happen if Cuba did not receive humanitarian aid from any nation that want to help Cuba out of genuine concern for care, want to support the local Cubans? What does Cuba have within their sleeves that they can provide for their own people without having to rely on other countries for humanitarian aid or additional trade exports? Even if there are countries like Mexico and the United States more than happy to provide Cuba with necessities that Cubans would certainly need in these trying times. They're not, again, there will come a point that these humanitarian aids that's being provided to Cuba, they're not going to last forever. Other countries would have to step in to help Cuba if the countries that are currently helping Cuba decide either to not give any more aid to Cuba, or the storage or the quantities that Mexico and the United States have to give to Cuba has run out. Again, it's not going to happen, especially the US. They have so much money and so much resources to give to other countries. It is worth thinking about cases where nations do not have infinite amounts of supplies or quantities of resources to give to other countries. If there is a limit that will run out in the near future, what happens then? I'm just saying, it's going to happen. Ukrainian athlete Hiras Kyiv appeal for reinstatement dismissed by sports court. The Court of Arbitration for Sport dismissed Ukrainian skeleton racer Vladislav Hiraskevich's appeal to be reinstated in the Milano Cortina Olympics after he was disqualified for his helmet of remembrance. Hiraskevich's helmet depicted athletes killed since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2020, breached the rules on political neutrality at the Games. The arbitrator stated she is sympathetic to Hiraskevich's commemoration, but found the limitations on political statements at the Olympics reasonable and proportionate. And I don't blame the Ukrainian athletes giving tributes to other Ukrainian athletes who have lost their lives since Russia brought their military into Ukrainian territory since February 2022. And I'm not saying don't give such messages if they're on helmets or parts of your uniform, like Hirashkevich has done. Yeah, I'm not going to say don't do what this Ukrainian skeleton racer athlete has done. I would say be strategic and smart about how you're presenting that. Yes, it has to be noticeable for viewers to see to show the message behind what is being presented. Yeah, gotta give it some time to ensure that a limited number of people see it, spread the message, in hopes that whoever's commentating, regulating, or observing the Olympics don't catch on to it until it's too late. And you can't give this disqualification to those athletes because those people who are trying to impose neutrality in the Olympics, they were given plenty of time to do what they had to do, but the time has officially passed. And even if it is not until too late that disqualification is given to the athletes, those athletes will be punished in some way. Like, if they won a medal, that medal is going to be confiscated because you're trying to be political, and that's not okay. The Olympics is about bringing people together and celebrating achievements in sport, in the athletic merits. I'm not sure what else to say. I'm certainly not against what Hirashkevich has done with the helmet when doing the skeleton race. On the other hand, it won't be fair for other nations to do what Hirashkevich has done and not be punished or be given consequences for those actions. If you're going to allow someone to be political, then surely those people should be more than okay and happy to let everyone be political. I will say. And it's okay to be open about your opinions, even if there's a lot of people who disagree with it. And whilst I wouldn't say I agree with everything that's been put in place, they're put in place for a reason. Not just fairness in sports merits, but also in terms of using the platform broadcast to billions of people, or at least millions of people, to get attention for whatever you have to say about what goes on in today's world. And that is it for the episode.